In Fear and Hunger, when you start a new game as the mercenary Cahara, the very first line of text shown to you is, "You were born with the soul of the endless that makes you yearn for freedom and forces you to push your creativity to its limits." So in order to understand Cahara, and by extension his soul type, we just need to answer two very, very simple and totally not controversial questions. What is a soul? And what is freedom? In response to the first question, souls are perhaps easier to define in the world of Fear and Hunger than they are in our world. In my prior video on enlightened souls, I liken them to both zodiac signs and Jungian archetypes. But for the sake of this video, I'd like to expand upon this by talking about Aristotle's idea of essence. Aristotelian essences are, to slightly oversimplify things, those immutable facets of yourself that you cannot lose without ceasing to be yourself, central tenets of your personhood. Your essences are what drive you, what make you, you. They shape how you act, how you move, how you feel, and so on. This is highly applicable in the case of souls within Fear and Hunger. They are immutable facets of each character. They determine their skill sets and broad strokes character traits. Aristotle says that essence can precede its own existence as potential, much like a half-built house has the potential to become a house, which is why not every character will learn every single skill that they can potentially learn. The essence is there, but not fully developed. As the game itself says in its opening lines, the soul of the endless makes someone yearn for freedom. It forces them to push their creativity. It is immutable and it informs their character. In short, in the world of Fear and Hunger, the time of one's birth helps to shape the core aspects of their personhood. That's what a soul is, first question sorted. Now we need to talk about freedom. Freedom is a nebulous concept with myriad interpretations, but within the scope of the world of Fear and Hunger, there are several ways to understand it and what it means for the unfurling plot. Hey, I'm Rher, and today we're going to be looking at every character with the endless soul to help understand what freedom looks like in the world of Fear and Hunger, and what this means for the lore and the ongoing story. Perhaps the most influential event in the timeline of Fear and Hunger is the birth of the eponymous god of Fear and Hunger, an event that is largely tied to the Endless Soul both through Cahara and the mother of the girl-turned-deity, Nilvan. When asking the new gods about Nilvan, they state,
"The new goddess, she believes in the endless potential of mankind, that anything can be within reach if you try hard enough. She is aware of the end of an era and is desperately looking for a way to continue her reign beyond her destined lifetime."
Here we have both a core defining trait as well as a directly stated motivation. She doubles down on this central belief with the dialogue, "For mankind to break free, we need more." Nilvan is a member of the Fellowship, a group of mortals who ascended to divinity to herald the dawn of the third age of mankind. Nilvan seems particularly concerned with the passage of time, much more so than her contemporaries like Francois, being aware that her era is due to end soon. Out of fear for this impending end, Nilvan hijacks Lagard's prophecy and uses him to birth the girl, a hitherto unknown kind of being. Of the girl, the new gods state,
"A pure being, in which both the strength of the new gods and the seed of the man from the prophecies come together. Never in written history has there been a similar situation."
But is this purely selfish? Is this just Nilvan looking to continue her reign beyond her destined lifetime, as the new gods say? I would argue no, but to explain why, we need to understand what freedom means to Nilvan and how her soul informs her. Whilst the dungeons of Fear and Hunger are a particularly awful place to be, the outside world is not all that much better. When asking the new gods about it, they say,
"You've seen the outside world, right? That's where you came from after all. Did you forget already? The world of humans is in chaos. They are waiting for their savior, someone to lift them from misery and agony, someone to stop endless wars, someone to cleanse them from their diseases, someone to destroy the old world order and the older gods that were the cause of the dark times."
It's not just Nilvan and Lagard who want to see an upheaval of the established social order, it's a commonplace sentiment. The end of the age seems inevitable if mankind is to progress beyond the stagnant part of history. Nilvan herself equates freedom to mankind moving beyond this status quo. She talks of mankind becoming free by gaining more power and insight across the board. Nilvan is not so much concerned with individual freedom. She herself is markedly utilitarian and is very willing to use others as fodder in her plans, be they Lagard or the player character when she sends them into the gauntlet to face the god of Fear and Hunger. Freedom to her is not personal freedom, the right of each being to make their own individual choices. Rather, she subscribes to the Hegelian concept of freedom. Hegel defines freedom as a kind of historical progress towards an ideological framework that will create a perfect society, arguing that the spread of freedom over time is what progresses mankind to a logical endpoint of total freedom and perfect existence. To Hegel, freedom is when a society becomes perfect by having an established social order which keeps everyone in check morally, whilst allowing them the ability to pursue the best interests of the wider population. For him, it was Christianity. For Nilvan, it's fear and hunger. Freedom is the ultimate goal, but in order to get there, the world must shift away from systems of despotism and establish systems that encourage freedom for all. Freedom in this sense meaning complete liberation from unwanted outward influence and inward vice. Freedom is a social framework which mankind works towards, not a personal liberty. Nilvan wishes to uproot the old world order, which is shaped by the deterministic whims of the old gods, and create one where mankind is completely free to determine their own future in the broad strokes. This is not freedom for the individual, but rather freedom for the species to chart their own course, ideally with herself leading the charge and continuing her reign. It's through her machinations that mankind is dragged kicking and screaming into the cruel age. She sacrifices to play a character to allow her child to become the god of fear and hunger, who drives humanity to enter the equivalent of our real-world industrial revolution. This technological advancement is likely part of Nilvan's plan for seeing freedom through historical progress, again much like Hegel, allowing humanity to pull further away from the old gods and determine their own future. This idea of progress through replacing the natural systems of the world is also hinted at in Termina's ending A, with the old god Venushka appearing to be in some way diminished with the activation of logic. This is similar to how the god of the depths loses influence over mankind with the creation of the god of fear and hunger. In both instances, ascended gods with a markedly anthropocentric sphere of influence rise to eclipse the old gods, who Nilvan sees as a threat to freedom. Perhaps the total end goal of both Lagarde and Nilvan is a complete replacement of the old gods with ascended beings born of human innovation. The two may remain allies well into the current day. Kaiser does have ties to a society called the New Gods. This would make sense when you understand that upon becoming a new god, Nilvan would be conscious of the influence of the old gods, an influence that she abhors and wishes to be free of, much like the rest of her fellowship. Of the greater hierarchy of the old gods, the new gods state,
"You only come to realize the greater scheme of things as you ascend to become a new god. Time is a cycle, as cliché as that sounds."
To be free of this cycle, mankind must strive to break it and replace the existing systems with their own creations. To be truly free, man must learn to escape the cycle. In short, Nilvan is shaped by a desire for freedom. As with all new gods, she is largely defined by her soul archetype, but this is not freedom as you or I might understand it. The right of the individual to self-determination is of no concern to her, and if you subscribe to the theory that she is High Priestess Selene, then she also quite literally keeps prisoners. She deprives people of their personal freedoms. To her, freedom is the emancipation of mankind from the whims of the primordial old gods, a holistic freedom of species not concerned with the minutiae of individual lives or the actual desires of those whose lives she shapes. However, we do see an endless soul highly concerned with personal freedoms, and so to understand disparity within identical soul types, we must look at the lovable rogue Cahara. While souls do play a role in one's motives, they are not homogeneous by any means. Cahara, like Nilvan, is driven by freedom, but rather than abstract concepts of freedom, Cahara is concerned almost entirely with the material. The desire is the same, the interpretation of it is not. Your soul demands you search out freedom, but each person will define freedom differently, creating disparity within the archetype. Cahara wants freedom to live comfortably, the freedom to go wherever he wants, whenever he wants, to own anything he wants to own, to say whatever he wants to say. To him, personal freedoms are the central driving facet of his personality, and they greatly inform his arc. Cahara is a born hustler. From a young age he was abandoned and had to fend for himself. His earliest memories are of honing his skills with daggers and stealing on the streets of Jataya. When not playing as him and recruiting him, he will routinely rob you, outright leaving the dungeons if you complete Isaiah's quest to find the Crown of Mahab with him in your party and you refuse to give it to him willingly. Even in his past lives, Cahara was trained in the arts of thievery, making him an almost cosmically perfect bandit. All of his actions are in service of his end goal of freedom. He speaks often of wanting to be able to pack up and leave whenever he wants, and his pursuit of wealth is all in service of advancing his personal freedoms. This isn't wholly selfish, however, as we learn from the flashbacks in the Tower of the Endless. Whilst Cahara carries a distaste for the elite and is honestly a bit of a smug bastard, he has a soft spot for the powerless, making his dual arc with the girl deeply thematically satisfying. In fact, when assuming Cahara achieving ending A to be canon, we get a lot of insight into what the game is trying to say about freedom and determinism. The canonicity of this can be debated, but in my opinion the events of Termina make this the most likely outcome for the character. This is assuming it was a playable character who takes the girl to the Altar of Darkness and not like Buckman or something.
Why are you disrespecting me, bruv? My mistake, original gangster. No, this cannot be forgiven. Now empty the compartments of your pantaloons. For what purpose? And discard of your footwear as well. For what purpose? In fact, I am equipped to summon the one casually known as Little Travis on your buffoon self.
Cahara comes to the dungeon to break out Lagarde and get paid, not just to increase his own financial freedom, but to free his lover Celeste, who is kept in indentured servitude in a brothel and is carrying his child. Immediately we see Cahara working not just to enrich himself, but also to free someone else. He's also motivated by a desire to be a better father than his own, whom he has some fond memories of, as is shown when he picks up the dagger, but he generally has a pretty bad view of. Cahara spends time locked in the dungeons, being captured shortly after arriving, but is able to escape the cells using his lockpicking. This very same lockpicking comes in handy when he finds a young girl emaciated and shaking in a small cage nearby. In recruiting the girl, Cahara is showcasing his commitment to freedom by literally freeing a girl from a cage, but also his soft spot for the downtrodden and the powerless. This very same desire to bring power to the powerless is exercised by the girl's mother Nilvan, but on a much larger, much more cosmic scale. Cahara forms a bond with the girl quickly. A peculiar doll can be found near the cell where Cahara is kept, a toy which the girl comes to love as a source of comfort in the unforgiving dungeons. The girl also excitedly wields the same dagger that prompts memories of his own childhood within Cahara. He raises her the same way he remembers being raised, making her tough and self-reliant while showing her the affection that he lacked. When delving deep into the City of the Gods, perhaps as part of his quest to find Lagarde, perhaps as part of the quest for the Crown of Mahav given by Isaiah, Cahara is drawn to the Tower of the Endless. Here, Nilvan infiltrates his dreams to show him visions of what he's doing all of this for, Celeste and his unborn child. Prior to revealing herself to Cahara, Nilvan has already established a connection between her motives and his, playing upon his budding paternal instincts to drive him to fulfill her request to take the girl to the Altar of Darkness. Cahara and Nilvan are quite literally kindred souls, so in making their similarities apparent, she's able to manipulate him even more than if she had just showed up and played off his chronic horniness. So the unlikely duo brave the horrors, and Cahara brings the girl to the altar, only for her to begin a horrifying metamorphosis. As her humanity fades, she reminisces on the few kindnesses in her life, the doll and the dagger, before Cahara is crushed beneath the weight of a new god being born, and the girl is utterly subsumed by the totality of her own soul. This arc is so thematically tight, as for all its larger-than-life concepts of divinity, it's all centered around the concepts of fate and freedom. Cahara comes to the dungeon seeking freedom, on a quest to free Lagarde. Nilvan has created the girl to try and free mankind. The girl herself is freed by Cahara, and humanity is moved closer to Nilvan's idea of a free world through the girl's ascension, the very same ascension that sees Kahara's end, robbing his family of freedom in the short term. We see two identical souls clash, and how one person's idea of freedom might just deprive someone else of theirs. On top of all of this, there's the underlying narrative current of just how free any of these characters are. Determinism is a key feature of the series. In the first game, there are numerous references to the machinations of the old gods. There seems to be no way to escape their designs upon humanity. The girl, Cahara, and Nilvan, how free were they? Were they simply following predetermined paths, chasing an abstract concept of freedom that would forever be unattainable? Perhaps it's a tragic irony that the pursuit of freedoms is all part of a linear story. They never had an option to diverge. Prior to the girl's ascension, she was already the subject of much discussion amongst the new gods, and we know from Termina that her ascension always happens. For all the diverging options a player might have, there is a set order of events that cannot be changed or delineated from. Indeed, the endless soul may refer to this endless chasing of an impossible ideal. The very concept of canonicity within Fear and Hunger is itself an existential nightmare when one considers the influence of primordial fate weavers. Indeed, in Berserk, a stated inspiration for Fear and Hunger, the concept of causality, the inescapability of one's own predetermined fate, is a central theme, and I believe it's no different here. To be born with the endless soul is to struggle against destiny and succumb to it nonetheless. Despite Cahara and Nilvan having disparate arcs, both intersect at the changing of an age. Both of their desires for freedom lead to them heralding in a major upheaval of the social order. Where enlightened souls are those with the prescience to see upcoming changes, endless souls are those with such a strong force of personality that they actively cause change. Their fundamental traits push them to take actions that will shape history, all in this pursuit of freedom. Nilvan was both a member of the Fellowship who ushered in the Third Age, but also birthed the child who would bring about the Cruel Age. Cahara ensured the girl pursued this destiny, not out of any sense of ideals, but just because he wanted to free her from the dungeons. They diverge in how they interpret their subconscious drive for freedom, but their role is greatly similar. Both strive for freedom, yet both are trapped on set paths where they're used as pawns for a greater plan. Now for the fun part of the video, where we get to look at Termina and speculate on what the role of that game's endless soul may be at the changing of eras. It's Karin time. Unlike Cahara and Nilvan, it's pretty hard to talk about what happens to Karin. We can only talk about what might happen, and there's some wild implications there. In Fear and Hunger's sequel, mankind once again finds itself at a time of great societal change, as much as said by Pocket Cat in your first meeting. And basically everyone else who isn't a chronically insane, unreliable narrator, so I'm not sure why I led with the cat. Termina has two potential era-changing events that can occur, being Ending A and Ending C. But before talking about those, we need to talk about what freedom means to Karin, and how this pursuit could shape her role in the changing of eras. Whilst Karin shares some of Cahara's respect for individual freedoms, she's largely driven by a desire for freedom of information. Growing up in the Eastern Union after fleeing the Bremen Empire, Karin was involved with civil rights groups from a young age, and upon returning to the Bremen Empire, she'd leverage this experience into a career as a journalist. Whilst working for a newspaper called the Midnight Gazette, Karin's writings are shaped by an inquisitive tone which urges the reader to question the established truths of authority, as is seen in the Kaiser critique, which concludes, "It is beyond me how the masses fail to see through these plans. Instead they give credence to Kaiser's madness and place more trust in his perversions than logic. There are no rational answers to the irrational ideologies which Kaiser brings to the table." Throughout Termina, Karin establishes herself as someone with a commitment to truth and rational thought. The freedom she pursues is a freedom of information, shining light on the mysteries of the world through rational explanation and bringing this truth to the masses. Karin is uncompromising in her beliefs, being downright unpleasant to people who dare to question her assertions of what she views as objective truth, as we see in her initial scene with Dan. She is a force of personality to be reckoned with, and a vessel of truth in a confusing time, the ideal propagandist if only any major power could corral her. However, Karin's image as a voice of truth is being distorted by the higher powers at play within Prehyville. Within the White Mold apartments there is a television. This television shows a broadcast of Karin reporting on murders in the apartments, but she never made any such broadcast, and has no knowledge of the murders. She's never even been to this town before. So this is a false Karin, being utilised to spread a message, but why? Well, there's actually a lot of potential interpretation, so I'll present you with two and you can choose what you want to believe, or you can come up with something completely crazy like Karin is being used as a sulfur salesman. The most obvious interpretation is tied to the fandom consensus that this depiction of Karin is a doppelganger. A doppelganger is a popular European myth of a double of a person which haunts them, often acting as a harbinger of danger. Interestingly, there's a similar ancient Egyptian concept of a spirit double called a Karin. In Winifred Blackman's 1927 book The Fellahin of Upper Egypt, she states, "Every human being is said to be born with a double, which is quite distinct from the Afrit, and is called, in the case of a man, the Karin, and in case of a woman, the Karineh." Myuu has stated that they put a lot of thought into the names of their characters, so this is something to consider. Indeed, Karin's backstory of being kidnapped as a child and replaced also has parallels with the European myth of the Changeling, another kind of supernatural double sent to replace a child. All of this is to say, there's a heavy mythological subtext tying Karin to the concept of being replaced by a supernatural double. The doppelgangers of Termina are quite difficult to narrow down. Rancid the Sergal implies that the doppelgangers are a direct result of the Termina festival, potentially created by Rher to replace missing people, a theory that's granted credence by the Samari doppelganger in Marina's ending. Rher is, after all, a trickster god, so tricking people with duplicates of themselves and loved ones does seem right up their alley. However, this doesn't explain why Karin's duplicate is being used as a news anchor to break stories. There's also a chance that doppelgangers are being created by Logic to serve its purposes. Many of the doppelgangers are found nearby to tele-electroscope bunkers, areas heavy with Logic's influence, and much like AI chatbots, they seemingly need to be fed lines of dialogue to learn from and appear more realistic, which ties into Logic's whole being the internet thing. This is generally believed to be why Karin's is so convincing. Her being a public figure and outspoken journalist, she's much easier to imitate than someone like Levi. So I subscribe to the theory that Logic is creating doppelgangers with a particular focus on creating a convincing doppelganger of Karin. This is because of the thematic relevance and the role of the endless soul at the changing of the era, being to struggle against something that will ultimately be your undoing in a futile attempt at freedom. Karin has heavy links to the Logic project. She has dreams before coming to Prehyville, she has a vested interest in uncovering what Kaiser is doing, she's usually included in people's lists of characters who would see a canon ending A. The purpose of Logic is to create a new world order through crafting a hive mind of information, creating paradise through consensus. Of course, this is in complete opposition to everything Karin stands for, being diversity of thought and questioning authority. In the events of Ending A, we see Karin, much like Nilvan and Cahara, struggle against something she's strongly opposed to fruitlessly as mankind enters a new era, the fate of the most potent endless souls. However, in a much more insidious end, Karin is not left forgotten to time like Cahara, but rather her visage is co-opted and parroted by Logic, using the faces of thought leaders and journalists as part of its plan to shape information and public consciousness, controlling narratives and weaving stories. By replacing influential individuals, Logic can subtly shape a monopoly of information. Karin, much like Olivia, felt a pull to Prehevil in the realm of dreams, somewhere we know the gods like Logic and Rher hold influence. Perhaps she was pulled in to be used as an acceptable face of a regime change, especially as she already held so much sway in the rights movements that wanted to usher in a replacement of the current world order. It is for this reason that I believe Karin's narrative purpose is much alike to her predecessors. She ties into the wider points the series wants to make about freedom and destiny, how one can create the conditions of their own tragedy by struggling against the inevitability of it, like King Laius or Macbeth. No fictional character can be a free-thinking individual, they are always beholden to narrative. As stated repeatedly through this video, the Endless Soul is a tragic one. To wish so badly for a freedom that cannot exist in the world of narrative determinism, I cannot imagine a more painful yearning. So that's everything for this one. Just a quick project to tide everyone through up till that Termina update. Please, it's coming soon. Trust me, guys. Trust me. Any day now. Any day now, guys, please. Okay, thanks to the members who are up on screen now. Up next, we're starting to look at the classic Telltale games with an extensive look at The Wolf Among Us. Also, special thanks to the many members of the Fear and Hunger community whose great breakdowns of logic, doppelgangers, and the plot all served as major inspirations. There's a couple of them on screen now. What do you think about the Endless Souls? Much like my Enlightened Souls video, I'm interested to see where you think the series can develop this archetype, if indeed that is something that will happen at all. Something I personally really enjoy about the series are the dual arcs of the soul types, how we see repeating story beats and themes play out over time. It's like poetry, it rhymes. If you made it this far, you might as well subscribe and like the video, or don't, you have free will. Or do you?